And we're recording. Fantastic. So, hi guys, and welcome to this session, which is, it's something. It's the how not to forget anything ever again. In fact, the easiest way to remember something. And it's a pretty foundational concept, this one that I'm going to talk to you about today. It's actually the one learning model that supports everything that we do as trainers and everything that we create as trainers within the Tony Buzan group, everything that we do when we're creating new books, everything that we do when we are creating new product, and of course everything that we do when we're creating new training programs or a new keynote. If you're going to get into training, you've got to have your killer keynote. We are going to be doing sessions on the killer keynote because it's one of the fastest ways really to reach out and connect with people, is to have a real zinger. And by a real zinger, I mean a 10-minute, everything up to a 60-minute keynote, but it should be honed, it should be tight. So this model is so important to the Tony Buzan group because what it does is it absolutely 100% reflects how every brain on the planet loves to learn. And when you know that, that is the key towards creating your own training materials, or if you're a student for yourself, being able to acquire knowledge. Because if you understand how the computer works, then it's really easy to go and program it the right way the first time, so that you learn something once and it stays. Well, I've got a t-shirt that says I learned something once, and on the back and it says so it stays bloody learned. You know, if you know how to program your brain, you know how to really create those strong memory traces the first time you come across information. It makes life so easy if you don't have to keep going back and relearning stuff. So, you ready for this one, guys? Honestly, it's so foundational. I've got no problem repeating this until everybody who needs to can see it. It is so important to everything that we do within the Tony Buzan group. So I am going to hop over and share you a screen. Here's a screen of, how cool is that? That is a little elephant. An elephant for memory, of course, because they do say that an elephant never forgets. Here we are. And I'm going to have a little chat to you today about creating two types of memory. That is long-term memory and short-term memories. Now, short-term memories are the your spouse asks you to remember to bring a pint of milk in when you come home from work of an evening. Yeah, remember when we used to go out to work? Well, usually the point at which you remember that you have got milk to bring home is the moment you put the key in the door in order to let yourself in, and then it's like, forgot. So short-term memories are notoriously easy to overwrite. They are notoriously unreliable. If you happen to be in a police or an army environment, you will now get training about how easy it is to do things like create imperfect memories or false memories that they used to teach you. Something that the CIA was involved in doing in the 1950s, even earlier in the UK, but we've got down to fine science now. We've actually, because we've discovered how easy it is to create really powerful memories, the flip side of that is, of course, it's also incredibly easy to create false memories. So that has a therapeutic use if you're looking to kind of overwrite something traumatic in the past, but it also has a slightly nefarious ruse as well, where, you know, people can use it to change what people remember about things and to manipulate. So once you understand the whole process, then you can see how you can flip it on its head. So the way to make your memory less corruptible, I can't say non-corruptible, or the way that you can create it so that your long-term memory is in charge, it's the filing system for all the memories that you create, is to make sure that you move everything you learn from short-term, where it's notoriously easy to corrupt, into long-term memories. So from where it's very easy to be overwritten to where it's very easy to remember. Now, long-term memories are stored in the part of the brain where you remember things like, what's your name? Where do you live? Are you married? Do you have kids? You know, those are kind of questions you don't have to think about too hard. You don't have to kind of rifle through the filing system in your brain in order to find out exactly what is my name, exactly where do I live? Do I have any children? Those are one of the last memories that become overwritten, particularly in old age, or if there is a neurological condition that's beginning to degrade memories, things like Alzheimer's and things. Those are the last memories to go. The short-term memories, however, very easy to wear out. So particularly when we're working with students, or if we're having to engage in personal development or learning within our own careers, may I suggest it might be more time effective to understand how we create long-term memories and be able to create memories from the go-get filed away in a long-term memory storage. It's incredibly powerful for the students I work with. I actually got called out this week. We were writing some copy. You guys know I work with lots of mentors, and at the moment I'm working with some mentors that are, well, fairly high up in the online marketing world, like kind of demigods in the online marketing world, if I must confess. You know, I mean, guys who really, really understand what they're doing, who've made millions. In fact, a couple of them have made billions online. And we were looking at the copy that I wanted to use for a program that I've got coming up, specifically for students. Now, it's specifically for kind of high school plus students that are going to do the English equivalent of A-levels and go on to do university entrance exams. Huge, huge market for me, particularly in places like the Philippines, in Singapore, in Hong Kong, etc. So the line I wanted to go with was that the students who work with me only get A's. Of course, my mentors were rather reluctant to let me go out with that as a marketing line, because they can't claim that. That's impossible. How can you say that the children who work with you only get A's? Well, a couple of reasons. One, they're very motivated to work with me. So if they're motivated to do the work, I can guarantee to show them a way that they will get A's. And two, because we understand the way the education system works, you can kind of game the system. So long-term memory within education versus short-term memory works like this. You know how in an exam you always work on the bell curve, and the average people, the people who are sitting in the passes or slightly above, are the people who sit right in the middle of the bell curve. So you've got a low, you've got a bell curve high, and then a low again for the people who are the A's, the A stars, and the superior students. Well, the research within education has shown that the student who recalls less than 10% but more than 5% of the information covered by a teacher and can successfully regurgitate that in an exam situation is an average student. So most of our students are getting an average grade, remembering between 5 and 10% of the entire content covered by a teacher in a semester or 2 semesters, a year or 4 years within school. Our proposal was quite simple. We didn't change the curriculum, we didn't change the teaching. What we changed instead was the students' ability to acquire information and to file it into their long-term memory storage. So instead of remembering 5 to 10% of the content that was covered, they would be remembering 80 to 90% of the content that was covered, and of course be able to successfully replicate that in an exam situation. I don't care which marker you would use. If an average is 5 to 10% and you've got students consistently turning in 80 to 90%, those are the students who are getting A's. So I was very, very confident in my claim that every year the students who work with me, who are committed, who do the work and who are disciplined enough to follow the process through only get A's in any of their exams. I have to say there were a few rather dropped jaws amongst some of these mentors, none of whom were incredibly successful in school. Some of them graduated high school, a few of them went through college. I think only one of them has actually done any kind of higher education, university level education in America, but they're all incredibly successful in their own right. But when you break it down and you show that, particularly for students within the education system that predominates most of the world at the moment, having a superior memory is the single most important thing towards increasing their grades. Now, for those of us who are no longer students within school, but I would argue that we're all learning new things all the time. In fact, that's part of the reason we've set up the Facebook group, is I want to challenge you to become more engaged with your learning, not just to learn the mind mapping, memory, study skills, speed reading, the kind of mental literacy stuff that I'm particularly passionate about. But I know within our group we've got people who want to go on and study law and medicine and, you know, physics and mathematics and some really high level qualifications. So what I propose is that we look from the very go-get at getting the foundations right, about making sure that everything we learn we're creating as long-term memories. Memories that are really, really difficult to overwrite, memories that are really, really easy to remember, so that you're building up a base level of knowledge, of understanding, level by level by level, as you're working through the information that you're acquiring, but it's there, always on the tip of your tongue, and always really, really easy to remember. So we always start off from the, before we even dive into mind mapping, before we give you a study skills program, before we even dip our toe into speed reading, let's talk about creating great memories, because it is the foundation keystone to absolutely everything that we do as Tony Buzan licensed instructors, professional speakers, authors, trainers, whatever it is that we're looking to do. So this is my elephant, my central image for memory, because elephants never forget. This is the left, right hand side of the brain, and of course long and short-term memory. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be really cruel, and I'm going to set you a test. Let me grab that. That's HQ wanting me to get in touch. So let's have a look at setting you a test. There we are. Within, there we are. Just so you can benchmark how good or how not your memory might be at the moment. Would that be good? Right, so what I'm going to suggest is you can do anything at all during this little test, except you're not allowed to write the words down. It would defeat the purpose. Okay, so I trust you. We're on the honour system here. I trust you're not going to write. And everybody's hands come up into view. Look. Oh. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read you a list. But here's the thing. Unless you've actually done some memory training in the past, I really, really, really don't expect you to be able to remember this list in its entirety. That's actually not the outcome I'm looking for when we're doing this. Instead, what I want you to be aware of is when you begin to feel overwhelmed. When do you recognize something is happening? Are there any words that jump out that you recognize? At what point do you start to get that little bit of the student rebel? And there's, I mean, all of us have got one of these student rebels inside our heads, okay? We've all had that triple geography Thursday afternoon where you were sitting there, head in your hands, going, I just wish this teacher would stop talking, because I am at the point that I'm about to, and the brains are about to come leaking out my ears. You know, at what point does that little internal voice, and we've all got one of those as well, start screaming at you, I wish Elaine would just shut up. I wish she would go away now. She's confusing me. I feel overwhelmed. I hate this. I'm a bad student. I can never remember. You know, all of that stuff that goes through your head. And we've all got that little voice that tells us these stories that we've made up about learning and about being engaged and about acquiring knowledge. And part of why I wanted to have this Facebook group was so that very gently, over the scope of 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, we can begin to unpick these stories that you've got about learning and show you that actually your brain is phenomenal if we can just quieten down that voice and let it do what it wants to do naturally, which is acquire knowledge. But I'm very, very aware that because I'm not working with you guys one-on-one, because I'm even not working with you in very small groups, I need to be very gentle about how I approach that. Because if I go in and go, you're wrong, and I'm going to prove it to you because I'm the expert, most of you would go like, out of here, right? But we're going to take this really, really gently. We're just going to keep, somebody else admitted. We're just going to keep this really gentle half an hour here and there until you'll get to the point where you actually understand that you can do this. Because the other thing I'm really, really passionate about as a teacher, as a trainer, is, if you tell somebody something, generally they just hear you. But if you actually help people to experience something, if you move them from I cannot do this to wow, I didn't know my brain could do this, they have the experience, then that kind of knocks down a lot of these brick walls that we have around us about learning and about our attitudes to memory and about getting older, about being young, about being male, about being female, about being, British or American or Australian or Filipino or whatever the story is that's going inside our heads. So be aware I'm taking this very gently. And if you work on me with a one-to-one basis, I am much less gentle, believe me. I'm a Scottish mammy. There's nothing gentle about Scottish mammies. So your first task, your first test that we're going to do is really not about finding a winner in the group because you're only in competition with yourself, but instead it's about finding a benchmark for, is your brain normal? Will it remember what I predict it will remember? Is your brain a little bit better than normal? A little bit worse than normal? Doesn't really matter, because by the end of a few weeks with me, your brain is going to be kind of in the top 5% of the population anyway, because you're going to have a better trained memory. You're going to have the strategies that does this. And it's not woo-woo, it's not magic, it is just what we found out works scientifically for creating great memories. So I am going to read you a list, and then we're going to come back and have a look at, there we are, at what happens during the period of this list. So the list begins, book of the white and of end time the and I've lost everybody now. You can tell as a trainer, you look out above the classroom and you see light bulbs going on, but you also see the opposite. So we've got hand, walk, work, Leonardo da Vinci, candle, hill, and stop, own, time, hold, of, last two words, house and coat. Okay? Now, what I'm willing to bet is that no one is able to remember the whole list from the beginning to the end, unless they've created a memory system. And that could be a route system, a link system, a journey system. You know, we're going to be covering those kind of later in the program. But unless you've been given an absolute strategy, then pretty much nobody can remember the list from beginning to end. And it's pretty much because we've designed the experiment to do that. We know that the average untrained memory has what we call the magic number. I know some of you will have come across the magic number in the past. And that says that the average untrained memory will remember between 5 plus or minus 2 bits of information in its short-term memory before it begins to overwrite the first information that was presented. So for most of us, that means that 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 bits of information of what we can remember in our short-term memory before we begin to lose the first memories. That used to be why telephone numbers were relatively easy to remember. 771857, my telephone number from when I was 3. I remember that. But now that telephone numbers can be 10, 11, 12, 14 digits long, it's less easy for us to remember phone numbers, even of people who are very close to us. I doubt I could remember my mother's telephone number, and I must talk to her 3 times a day. But because we've got one of these, we kind of rely on the exterior brain to remember our number for us. Now, not to say that you can't remember numbers, because indeed in the World Memory Championships, we've got people who can remember telephone numbers that are 4,000 digits long, 5,000 digits long, 6,000 digits long. So, you know, it's perfectly possible to do it once you have the strategy. Now, I'm not suggesting you go and learn 7,000 digits of pi or whatever just because you can, but it's an interesting thing to play with, the ability to be able to memorize numbers, to memorize data. So what I've actually done is I have been really sneaky, because I've overwritten a lot of what your memories were with that list. I've disrupted your recall. I've kept wittering on after the end of the list in order to degrade and affect and overwrite your memory. Cruel. Yeah, really cruel. And I am really cruel. So here's what we are. Now, can you guys see my elephant? Okay. So my question is, I'm going to move down here. This is the graph. This is the model I'm going to be building for you guys, okay? That's going to show you what the normal untrained memory recalls. Recall over here, over a period of time. So over any period of learning. Now that period of learning can be the length of that list that I just read you. It could be a period in school, could be a week in school, could be a semester at university, it could be an entire degree, it could be an entire school degree right up till PhD level. It could be a whole scope of education, you know, somebody from medical student to fully qualified doctor and beyond, because even when you qualify, you never stop learning. It could be an entire lifetime. This could be you are born here and you die here, and in between everything you do is all about learning. So the period is inconsequential within this model, because you can overlay it over any period and the model remains constant. Pretty cool. In fact, such an important part of what we do at the Tony Buzan Group that Tony called this MIG, M-I-G, the most important graph, because it was fundamental to everything that he discovered about the brain, every conversation he'd had with any neuroscientists, every dinner he had with a memory expert, and believe me, he got to hang out with some of the best, any debriefings that we did with world memory champions and some of the memory athletes about, you know, show me how you do that. Trust me, most of the time at home, people just think they're a little bit weird because they're memory champions. But when you get 300 of them in a room for 5 days at a time, there's lots of people really, really keen to tell you exactly to the minutest detail how they're able to do such phenomenal memory feats. So here is my recall after learning graph. Right, so here we are, recall after learning, here we are. So, anybody remember any of the first few words back in our list? Nod along if you think you might. A few nods. Anybody remember the first word? Nodding along, second word, third word, fourth word. People are beginning to go, looking into the recall. Fifth word, sixth word, seventh word was when I said, I've lost you all, haven't I? We've all had that experience of looking out at a group where we've seen the light bulb go on and all of a sudden people understand what you're talking about. Conversely, we also have looked out over a group and thought, I've lost them. The group is gone. That was the point I wanted you to get to. So 8th word, 9th word, 10th word, 11th word. No, okay. Does anybody remember what the last few words were? Yeah, particularly because I ticked you off. The last 2 words are house and coat. Again, we've all had experience of that. Triple geography Thursday afternoon. Quarter to the bell coming, we suddenly became much more engaged in the class because the bell was about to ring and we were out of there, you know, and you would start to slide your pencils into your pencil case and slide your pencil case into your bag, like the teacher couldn't see what we were all doing, right? Of course you could. But, you know, much more motivated towards the end of a period of learning, particularly if you know that the end of a period of learning is coming. You know, get a little spike in recall. Right, here's a question for you. Does anyone remember any words that kind of, here we go, let me go end. So if we start at the beginning and our recall is quite high because we can remember 5, 6, 7 bits of information, and then we go through the doldrums in the bottom, and towards the end it kind of spikes again because we know what's coming. The end is coming, so we're much more engaged. Always tell people when the end of your piece of training is going to happen, and that keeps them much more engaged. Now then what happens? Does anyone remember one particular word that kind of jumped out, caught your attention? You know, we had Leonardo da Vinci. Yep. Now, it jumped out because it was unusual. It was a name. It was an Italian name. Leonardo da Vinci actually ties into a lot of stuff that I'll be covering with you guys later, but here's a story about false memories. I was teaching this with a group of teacher trainers. Great group. I mean, teachers absolutely desperate to find, you know, the thing that makes it even easier for their kids to engage in the learning. But they don't get out of school very often. Can appreciate that, you know. So when they get to come to a teacher training day, so me not going into the school but then coming in en masse to a teacher training day, they were going to make the most of it. So a lot of them had arranged to kind of stay over the night before or stay with friends in the local area so they could all meet up, and then they could come to the training the next day and then they could head home. So, you know, they were in a great mood because there was going to be great stuff happening. But this particular table came in, and they'd had, well, there were a group of teachers who'd gone through university together. They were a cohort. They knew one another. They decided to get together the night before, and they were going to have a pizza and movie night, which, of course, was pizza, movie, and a glass of wine. Well, actually it was pizza, movie, and probably a bottle of wine each. You know, they'd had a really fun night together. And the movie that they decided they were going to rewatch was The Beach by Leonardo DiCaprio was in it. When he was, you know, very interesting to look at, shall we call it that? He was pretty buff, you know, he'd been working out, he'd been with a trainer, he was very well defined, he was young, he was handsome, you know, he was a good lead for that particular film. So what was top of their mind was I've had a really great time with my friends last night, and we got to eat pizza and we got to drink wine, and I had no kids to take care of, and I've got a whole day hanging out with my friends today, and I'm feeling a little bit, I'm looking forward to the morning coffee break because we've had enough wine, but I don't feel bad, but you know, I have felt better. And oh goodness me, she's going to ask me to memorize things. So of course, when I said Leonardo da Vinci, which I always use because it ties into something I do later, they heard Leonardo DiCaprio because it was the closest, most associative memory that they'd had. Okay, so one table, utterly convinced that I'd said Leonardo DiCaprio, 95 other teachers in the hall going, no, she definitely said Leonardo da Vinci, and we've got it on video. So, but just goes to show you that sometimes you can create a memory that is not accurate in the very first moments that you create it. Absolutely, we could unpick it, we could understand why that was made, but it wonderfully demonstrated the point. So you need to look for the unusual, the outstanding things that happen during a period of learning something. You know, pretty sure that, all right, if my door was to fly open and a knight on a white charger was to come storming up my hallway into my office, throw me over the pommel of the horse, dive out that window and go cantering up the hill opposite, pretty sure that when you logged off from here today and somebody said, so, you know, that bit of training Elaine did, what happened? Pretty sure you would remember that. Not the usual kind of thing that would happen, like ever, sadly. You know, anybody knows a knight on a white horse, you know, please come liven up my lockdown. But, you know, that would be an unusual thing that would happen. So we've all had experiences of that during a period of when we've been learning something where something bizarre has happened, and it roots really powerfully within our memory and creates a really strong memory trace. But if you look at that start and end point being an entire life, those unusual or outstanding memories may be things like your wedding day. It may be, you know, the birth of your first child or any child, because those are all pretty unique experiences for most of us, you know, but we've all got those moments in our lives, those kind of route map, those milestones that are, you know, wow. Guys, one day I got up and I went to work on an elephant. Not very many people say that they got up and they went to work on an elephant through the middle of Bangkok, of all places. But they decided that they would take us from the hotel to the training venue on the back of an elephant through all the traffic in Bangkok, which was interesting. But I mean, how memorable is that? Some days you get to ride elephants. So unusual or outstanding things create spikes in your memory. So, you know, be looking to create things that are unusual and outstanding when you're looking to acquire knowledge or you're looking to impart knowledge. Now, what about during the list? Were there any words that you found were repeated? Becomes more and more and more prevalent. The longer this list goes on, the more you hear me go, and of the, right? So repetition is quite important for creating long-term memories as well. Now, good news, it's not repetition ad infinitum, but I'm not going to do a spoiler. You're going to have to come back to another piece of training for me to show you how few times you need to review information for it to go from your short-term to your long-term memory. But the good news is, guys, it's not as many as you might think. But yeah, and of the kind of nonsense words, if you like, but they were repeated a lot during that list. So bear in mind that repetition is also really important for creating great memories. So I have got a particular memory of when I was 6, of the journey that I used to make to go to Brownies when I was a little girl. So every Tuesday night I used to go off to Brownies, and my mum walked me the first few times and went, you know, you get here, you turn left, you get here, you stop at the road, you cross the road when it's safe, you go across the park, you turn right, you go into we did the journey forwards and backwards a few times. And then, of course, it was something that I did weekly for about the next 6 years before I graduated and went on to Girl Guides. Oh, sorry, is somebody not muted? If you could just make sure that you're muted, and that would be. There we go. So repetition is really important. In fact, that journey of me at the age of 6 of going to the Brownies, trust me, that was a long time ago. 51 this year, so it was a long time ago. I can still visualize really, really clearly in my imagination because I repeated it so often. If you think about your walk to school, or your walk to a familiar place, or shut your eyes and imagine your bedroom, these things that you see repeatedly are things that create really, really strong memories. So we know that beginnings and ends are really powerful. Things that are really unusual or outstanding are really, really powerful. Repetition seems to play a part in there as well. And these cute little green arrows are, of course, how interested you are in learning the information, because undoubtedly the more interested you can be about learning information, the easier it is to learn new information. Much easier to become an expert in something that you're passionate about learning. Much more difficult to engage a student who's completely turned off from, say, maths or English. The irony of me being somebody who relies in the spoken word. I'm sorry, let me go and find out what's. Right, there we go. Sorry, it's one of those things on Zoom that if somebody doesn't realise they should be on mute. It's much easier to learn something about something you're passionate about rather than trying to put somebody and be engaged with something that they've lost interest in. And of course, me, I'm all about words. I spend my week speaking on video calls, recording podcasts, being interviewed live on Zoom, writing, creating books, creating training materials. My life is all about words. And as an ex-stage manager who used to work with scripts, that's perfectly reasonable to me. Words are my superpower. I live in a house where I've got 2 sons who would do anything rather than sit down and read a book. I've got one who's off studying physics, and he's about to go into his 3rd year of physics at Edinburgh University, and the other one that I would seriously have to gaffer tape him to the chair to be able to make him sit down and read a novel. So for them, numbers are the language. They're science nerds, they are physics nerds, they are computer nerds. They're not interested in the lyric of the spoken language in the way that their mum is. So everything that I teach for them, I've kind of got to be aware that I'm going to them through the language of mathematics and science rather than, but just listen to the beauty of the language. So whatever you're interested in, you want to be able to tie that into the new information that you're already covering. The good news is, and we'll cover this again in a future training event, is that you can actually con your brain into being much more interested in something and therefore kind of hack the neurological soup, the chemical makeup of what's happening within your brain as you're creating strong memories just by doing some very simple strategies. So we know that primacy and recency is really important for creating strong memories. The first time you come across the information is the time where you create the strongest memory. That's the reason that I try and get my students very quickly to accept the fact that a messy first mind map is often more memorable than one that you've taken time to tidy up and make pretty, because there is something about the memory that you create in the moment that is much more powerful than having a quote-unquote pretty mind map. I definitely found this when I was a stage manager, that I was able to navigate my way through entire scripts of entire guys. At one point I was in charge of Les Miserables in the West End, right? Hundreds of people, hundreds of staff, great big script, lots of songs, thousands of lighting cues, you know, massive big thing that you were in charge of every single day as kind of the orchestra, orchestrating all together. And a lot of the time you were navigating by the coffee stains or the cigarette marks on the script rather than the actual words, because it all became so familiar. So you're always looking to create a strong, first time you come across the information, make that as powerful as you can. And you get a little spike towards the end, which is particularly useful if you're trying to be really effective in how your learning is structured. And I'm going to come back to that in another session. But how can you make yourself have that spike at the end? And we know that the von Restov effect is a real thing. That's the knight coming crashing through the door, throwing me over the pommel of horse and heading out up the hill. If something is unusual or outstanding, or it creates a really strong mental movie in your head, then you know that's going to create a really strong memory for you. And understanding that we need to engage our imagination and create these wonderful mental movies is very, very useful when it comes to structuring what it is you want to learn or what you want to impart. Of course, association, repetition, incredibly important. As I told you before, the good news is that's not as often as you think it might be, but there are some pretty specific times where if you really want to game the system to your favor, I'm going to give you the exact to the day strategy of when you should go back and you should review content that you are learning. And of course, the reason that I am quite so passionate about mind mapping is that if you're going to have to review the information that you're learning, the quickest way to do that is to throw it all on a mind map, because a mind map can be reviewed in 60 to 90 seconds. And if a mind map can contain the data from an entire book, pretty sure no matter how good you are at speed reading, and we're going to get you pretty good at speed reading, you're not going to be able to reread that book in 60 to 90 seconds. So that's the reason that mind maps for me are the ultimate hack when it comes to acquiring knowledge, because they are so quick to review. And you'll see as we begin to build up all of these keys and these practices, that if you engage with this, everything will begin to mesh together and it becomes this unstoppable, you become this unstoppable, immovable learning machine, because everything you learn just kind of layers up and you've got it all there together. We create the infrastructure so that the memory traces for you don't degrade. So my prediction was that most of you guys would be able to remember 7 plus or minus 2 bits of information. It was kind of borne out with me because I could watch you. It's one of the lovely things about Zoom is I actually see all your faces really closely. When I'm standing on stage in front of, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 5,000 people, I can't see the moment at which everybody's light bulb dims and goes out. Or even the lovely bit where it happens in opposite and all the light bulbs go on. Because if you're talking in front of a huge group of people, can I be honest? You only see the first 2 rows. Beyond that, everything else is pretty much a blur because the lights are out in your face and everything else is just a shadow. One of the greatest joys I've discovered in being able to go online and do training using Zoom and social media is I actually get to see you guys. Not quite eyeball to eyeball, but pretty close. You know, I can see when people's faces lighten and they get it. I can see the scowls when they don't. I can see they're thinking about it. You know, it's much, much better for me as a trainer personally. I know that's kind of selfish. So I'm hoping that being able to be beamed onto your desktop or your phone or your iPad is good for you guys too. But I could predict with a great deal of certainty that by the time I got to the 7th word in the Leonardo list, most of you were at this stage. And you were. You know, until you get a better memory strategy, magic number is 7 plus or minus 2 bits of information. Slightly less if you're dyslexic, slightly more on some aspects of Asperger's and autism, but pretty much within about 1 or 2 points, people are 7 plus or minus 2 bits of information in their short-term memory before the memory starts to get overloaded. And of course, what we want to do to be super learners is we want to make sure that we've got more information in our long-term memory storage that can't be overwritten. So we've got that, we've learned it once, it stays remembered, and we've got it forevermore. Because remember that bell curve? You know, where are you guys going to be in a year if you stick with this? You know, and I'm not going to deluge you with content. There's maybe going to be a couple of hours per week of stuff. Well, mostly fun stuff, but there'll be some serious learning stuff, like today was kind of serious learning stuff. But if you stick with me for a year, you guys are not going to be part of that bell curve. You are going to be way off the top. You know, you're going to be the A+ students, just because you are going to understand so much better how your brain naturally loves to learn, and your brain does naturally love to learn. Just go and look at any toddler before school has got a hold on them and see how passionate they are about learning everything. You know, part of my job, sadly, is about turning teenagers back into those unstoppable learning machines. But you guys are going to know how to do this. And I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to make sure that I step you through the experience of being able to do this so that you can share it with other people. So this graph at the top here, the one that starts high, goes down and dip in the bottom and spikes at the end, that has repetition spikes, and of course the unusual, the outstanding, the Leonardo da Vinci moment within the graph. It's called MIG, the most important graph. It is the most important model for us as communicators, as trainers, as parents, as students, because it's the model that we've kind of held up against all the brains everywhere in the world that we've ever been. And trust me, even with our top team, you know, the 5 guys who are top of the Tony Buzan group, if we total up how many times we must have run this experiment in how many different countries with how many audiences, there must be knocking on nearly 1 million people now that have gone through this process and realizing that 7 ± 2 is about all you can hold in your short-term memory system. So therefore, what we need to be doing is using the other memory storage system, the long-term memory storage system. The shame is that no matter where we go globally, bar Singapore does this, and Saudi Arabia is looking to put this into their education system. But apart from those 2 countries at the moment, we don't seem to spend very much time with our students teaching them how to learn how to learn. Yeah, ideally, what I would like to do is take every 10-year-old and put them through 1 day with one of our trainers to go, never worry about learning anything ever again, just here's how your brain works, now go off and do it. It would probably cause our education system to spontaneously combust, because those children would be learning far faster, far more effectively, and there would be so much more content that would need to be delivered in order to keep these children kind of housed until they were in year 6 or whenever. So over the course of the year, you're going to get a real deep dive into lots of the stuff that you can pass on to the students in your lives, to the children in your life, your own kids, or just apply it for yourself if you just want to be a superior learner. It's 2 sides of the same coin. So I was quite happy to predict that you guys would remember only 7 ± 2 bits of information. Absolutely secure in that. Goes to prove to me that this group here we've got is completely and utterly average. But average is good, because now we've benchmarked you. We come back in the 1st of July next year, and I was to read the Leonardo list. I can guarantee you that every single one of you would be able to remember it from the beginning to the end, forwards and backwards, and from any point in the middle. But nobody has not been able to do that after they've been working with us. It's not because we're particularly great trainers, but we are trainers who completely understand how the brain loves to learn and loves to acquire knowledge. So with your permission, my friends, I'm going to wrap this up for today on the understanding that we're going to come back. I think the plan is that every Tuesday we're going to do a nice meaty bit of training, you know, a 45 minute piece of training for you guys. If you can come live, fantastic. If you can't come live, don't worry, it's being recorded and we will upload it to the private Facebook page under the units. If you look to the left hand side of your page, you'll see that there's units down the side. That's where all the videos are going to be stored, any of the downloadables, any of the worksheets. But this year is just going to be you and I taking a meander through how utterly wonderful your brain is already, and just showing you what it does so that you can make that much more effective. And we will come back to the Leonardo list, trust me. And we will come back to Meg. In fact, Meg pops up so many times. You'll begin to see Meg popping up on lots of different mind maps and things that I share with you. But just know that it is the most important graph. It's the one foundational piece of neuroscience that I wanted to take time and give you an experience of, so that you would understand when we go forward why we do everything that we do. And that is really to make sure that everything we do, we look at it through the filter of Meg. Are we teaching this in the most effective way? Am I learning this in the most effective way? Am I working with how my brain loves to learn, as opposed to following some, shall we say, some outdated scripts that I may be running about how I am as a student, or as a teacher, as a parent, or as a trainer? So I'm really looking forward to you. I'm really looking forward to you, can I confess, because I've got the next year scoped out. In fact, I'm driving my team batty, because every time I go on the phone to them, because we have a daily call, I'm going, but I want to do this as well. So although I've committed to there's going to be one piece of meaty training every week, there is going to be plenty going on in this group. There's going to be times when I'm going to upload just some Facebook Lives, I'm going to do some other video content, some presentations, some downloadables, some books and things. I'll just get them all. They'll all be captured within this Facebook group. So if you know anybody that you think might want to come and join, point them towards the group. But as I talked about last week, it's only people who commit and answer all the questions that we're going to let in, because otherwise we end up with spammers and all sorts of crappy stuff that you've got to administer. So if you've got somebody who's desperately keen to learn, invite them along. But this will be a 12-month meander through all things neuroscience, learning, acquiring knowledge and training. And Tuesdays are going to be the meaty piece of learning. Thursdays are going to be more whatever is happening in the news, open office Q&As, or things that pop up in the group. Because sometimes you get asked some really interesting questions and you go, do you know what? That's not in the training, but let's go and do that now. So Tuesdays are for the keystone pieces of training. Thursdays, much more ad hoc, because it keeps me interested as well, keeps me on my toes, and we'll make sure that we've got plenty of time for Q&As. But if you don't mind, guys, I have held you now here for 50 odd minutes. I'm going to make sure now that I sign off. I'm going to see you inside the Facebook group, because it's the one place you can ask questions and you will get a response. And then I will see you, if you happen to be in my time zone, on Thursday, whenever we're back for the next live at 11 o'clock. So see you guys later.